welcome to New York City Atheists live on tape, brought to you by New York City Atheists Incorporated. I am your host, Dennis Forbitz, David Letterman of the Hopelessly Damned, and I approve this message. The last time we had our guest, Dr. Peter BRANCAZIO, we just didn't have enough time to get in all the question and answers, and in fact all of the lecture that he had prepared. So basically what we covered was the Old Testament, and I think this time we're going to be picking up where he left off, dealing with the New Testament, and it's, I guess it's getting its inspiration from the Old Testament. But if I can just take a second and put in a plug, this is why if you're watching the show, you should get involved, because we get so many people down here, and people, we have such interesting guests, and people start asking questions, and we don't have enough time to get all the stuff into one show, so we've got to kind of do more than one show for each subject and guest. And in any case, I just want to give you a little background before I introduce him. And we have members of we have independent reporters here tonight, and apparently we also have the police after us too. So, but as such, our guest is wired like a Christmas tree and set to go off. So. But I just want to give you a little bit of background for those one or two of you who didn't watch the last show. Dr. BRANCAZIO was chosen by Newsday as one of 6 great teachers in New York in 1990. He taught for 35 years in the physics department at Brooklyn College. He created and taught for 7 years a now famous course called Science and Religion, inspired by a grant from the famous Templeton Foundation. He is the author of the book, The Bible from Cover to Cover, which I am now about halfway through and totally recommend. I don't know if we can get a close-up, Joe. We'll try to get a swoop. Sorry if we're making you dizzy out there in television land. I'm about halfway through this. It's a great book. I recommend it. And as I said to him before the show, I pay him the highest compliment I can pay any author. It is now splattered with steak sauce. So without any further ado, I think we should just Peter come out.
Okay. And it's interesting because the Jews themselves believed in 2 gods, at least 2 gods. If you go back into the Old Testament, you find that the Jews worshipped El, who is referred to, in other words, when you read the text in the Hebrew, there are 2 names for God. One is Elohim and one is Yahweh. And it's come to us say, well, those are just names we use interchangeably. That's not true at all. Elohim was the high god of the creator god of the Canaanites. And Yahweh was the local god of the Jewish people. So in other words, you had a high god and you had a tribal god. And so there were 2 separate gods. One was the high god that was the creator above everything, and the other was the local god who was the one who took care of your personal needs. There was a huge battle, not physical battle, but conflict in Jerusalem, I guess around 620 or so, between these 2 competing groups. Scholars refer to them as the pagan Yahwists. They were pagan because they worshiped more than one god, but they worshiped Yahweh as their special god. And the Yahweh alone group, the ones who said Yahweh is the only God. So in the Bible, when it says, the Lord is my God, this is a translation of Yahweh is Elohim. Okay, so what they did was to take 2 separate gods, Yahweh and Elohim, and to merge them into one. And this is where monotheism comes from. Right? Now, you say, well, how many gods are there really? Well, of course, the prevailing opinion in this room is 0, okay? But the next best choice is either one or many. Now, it's surprising how many different groups in history believed in 2 gods. A creator God, who is above it all, and a local God. And in a way, that makes a lot more sense. Because as we've learned, the universe is an enormous, enormous place. It is extremely complicated. If you've ever studied relativistic quantum mechanics or particle physics and say, well, this all came, or DNA, for example, this came out of the mind of God who says that you should not eat ham. Or that if you ask him nicely, he will help your basketball team win. So the idea, you can see that people who believe need a personal God. That's what God is for. As I said, this is one of the disadvantages of atheism. If you're in an airplane and you look out the window and the wing, you know, the engine is on fire, the ones who can pray are the lucky ones on that plane. You know, they're the ones who have some sort of psychological cover for what's about to happen to them. But on the other hand, I've always raised the question of why is monotheism, given that you have to believe in something, why is monotheism better than polytheism? Doesn't it make more sense that there would be a race of gods rather than just one? I mean, after all, God, as he is pictured to us, has no life whatsoever. He has no friends. He's just up there. He's got no history, whereas the gods of the Romans, the gods of the Greeks, they had a whole society up there. And that makes a lot more sense when you think about it. Now, I think one of the beauties of Christianity is that Christianity is really a polytheistic religion. Right? Judaism gives you this one, not very friendly God, who is sort of, when you picture the Jewish God, he's kind of scowling all the time, you know. Whereas Christianity has God the Father, who is very kind, and he's sort of very separate. And then they have Jesus, and then they have, of course, the Virgin Mary, who is a important figure for Christian women, and was a very clever replacement for the fertility goddesses that everybody worshipped. So we do away with fertility worship. We don't worship fertility. We worship Mary instead. And people take this very, very seriously. I read once an article about this group of women who worship the Virgin Mary, and they say, we always wear blue because that was the Virgin's favorite color. Now, how they know that? Well, just go into any church, and she's always wearing blue. So, but it's the advantage of having all of these different deities and saints that you can pray to for special causes. You know, I have to tell you that one of the things I'm going to say is you don't have a festival of San Gennaro if you don't have a San Gennaro. In other words, you need a saint, and one of the beauties of Christianity is it has all these saints, and you have all these celebrations. So last week we were in Glen Cove. We went to the Festival of San Rocco. There's a Saint Rocco. I don't know what the heck he did. But anyway, they had this great festival. They had food, and they had Zeppole, and they had peppers, just like San Gennaro, and rides and stuff like that. And we walked into the church, and there are these shrines to different saints. One of these saints, I'd never heard of the name before, she was the patron saint of people who had cancer. Now, that's a tough job. And probably the fact that you don't know her name means that people have prayed to her without a whole lot of success, so she's not that well known. But there is a great advantage to having a polytheistic religion because it gives you, I mean, the gods then have specialties, and you can deal with them. So, anyway, Christianity has come down to us. As I said, it was not the invention of a single person. It was not created by Jesus. It was not created by Paul. It was created by a committee. And basically, they did a pretty good job of it as far as Christians are concerned. Right? So, anyway, these are the things that you get out of reading the New Testament. Basically, when you read between the lines, when you read what critical scholars have to say about it, you find it's quite more fascinating than you would think. Okay, I think I'll stop here, and thank you. I'm going to leave it over for questions. Okay. Take questions? I mean, there are these sightings of the Virgin Mary that go back. Why are they treated so nicely in the Gospels? Well, because those are the people that are your overlords. You're not going to criticize them. So the idea is to make them look good and make the Jews look bad. Yes? The Greeks have a Saint Demetria, who used to be known as Demeter, the Greek goddess. To Saint Demetria, and they worship the same way. So yeah, that was one of the clever things, whether they did it consciously or not, but they preserved the idea that you could worship more than one deity.
You know, I wouldn't be doing my job. The idea that that the whole virgin thing was invented to cover the fact that Jesus may have been illegitimate.
Nobody knows. Nobody knows for sure. I've heard that theory, but before you go, huh? Matthew considers it to be a prophecy. He says, in some words, in the book of Isaiah, it says, "A virgin shall give birth to a child, and name him Emmanuel." Okay. Now, of course, he was named Jesus, so right off the bat, this doesn't make
That kind
sense.
of gives it away.
Yeah, it does. But it says, it's a young woman will give birth, and he was talking about something specific to Isaiah's time. I guess it was the kingdom of Israel was about to be invaded, and so the king goes to Isaiah and says, "What do I do now?" And Isaiah says, "Do nothing, because in the time it takes for a child to learn how to speak, the problem will go away." So basically, he says a young woman will give birth to a child. They will name him Emmanuel, and before he has reason, the problem will disappear. So Matthew, as he did with many things, just plucked these lines out of the Old. He just must have scoured the Old Testament back and forth, picking out lines and then writing stories around them to show that Jesus was a fulfillment of prophecy.
That's typography, isn't it? Is what they...
That's what they call it, yeah.
Somebody from this side.
Yeah.
The comment that you made about Jesus being apocalyptic.
Yeah.
One possible theory, however, you're aware of the fact that even before Jesus and Jesus himself and the Gnostics later on were really into a self-awareness of
The
Christ.
Gnostics were, yeah.
No, so was Jesus, perhaps, and also the Essenes and a number of other members of the Jewish community at that time. And following the thoughts of, for example, Abraham Maslow, that these are people who were self-actualizing and therefore were giving their community information about what it's like to be a self-actualized or transcendent human being. Mm-hmm. And this thing got perverted into a religion.
Well, Gnosticism precedes Christianity, and that's what Gnosticism was about. It really was about self-actualization. And it's interesting that if you read the Gospel of Thomas, it's a Gnostic gospel. Jesus is portrayed as a Gnostic. He talks about secret knowledge, and if you know the beginning, you will know the end, and all of these mystical statements about knowing yourself. And so this was another version of Jesus written by a Gnostic. So again, it's, Yes?
My question is about the historicity of Jesus, which you started with.
Yeah.
You mentioned some expert in the field. I'm not familiar with that question, but there are two others that come to mind, Robert Price and Acharya S., who've written a lot about this. Acharya S. is she's actually, she studies mythology, and
Yeah.
she wrote a book, I think it's called Sons of God, where she lists 16 such messianic characters in history. And there are a lot of things that are common, with Jesus, like with Buddha. Like they were all born a virgin. Like in Buddha's case, he was born on the side of his mother. There's a story, And there's so many things in common. And so I was wondering if maybe you dismissed it offhand. How much? I mean, there's no doubt that there was a person called Jesus. And it was a very common name in Galilee at that time.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's also possible that that the myth was created over time and culture evolved. You also mentioned later that philosophy.
Now, let me just show
Okay. Can I just finish it up? Wrap it up?
Yeah.
You mentioned that the philosophy is too cohesive that it couldn't have been invented by a committee. But there are cohesive philosophies like Hinduism, for example, that it evolved over time, and culture has a tendency of doing that.
But this is over a period of 50 years. Hinduism evolved over a very, very long period of time. But Christianity just suddenly appeared within, Jesus supposedly died in 30. By 45, there was a Christian community in Rome. Okay? And there were Christian communities in Antioch and various places. And it's hard to figure out how people could get together, create a myth, and then have it, spread around in so many different areas. I mean, as I said, people did not move around that easily in those times, and people were not literate. So a lot of what was passed along is word of mouth. But nevertheless, I still think there has to be a historical person behind it who bears very little resemblance to Jesus Christ, as he has been, as he's evolved over time. Yes?
Just a point of information. I thought that Christians, Gentiles were synonymous.
No.
So maybe
Well, now they
Gentiles.
are.
Yeah, but
Well,
who are the Gentiles?
there are Gentiles and there are Jews. One division. If you're not Jewish, you're Gentile. But that's if you're Jewish, you look at it that way. But in those days, Gentiles were, well, still, actually, that's right. At that time, a Gentile is anybody who wasn't Jewish. So it covered. What's that? Yeah, right, right. So that was the original division of it. Right, yes?
You mentioned that there were two names that were given to God.
Yeah.
Yahweh and...
Elohim and Yahweh.
Oh, out of curiosity, what is the name Jehovah? What is that called?
I am that I am, I think is the best translation of it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it was the name, this is the name that Jews are not even supposed to speak. In the text, when you come to the word Yahweh in the text, you say Adonai. So the word, in Judaism, the name of God itself has tremendous power, just pronouncing the name, so they never say it. I think only the priest is allowed to say it once during Yom Kippur. So there's still this worship of the name that goes on in Judaism.
Yes, sir.
Those 50 Gospels discovered in 1945. I guess
they
they've
weren't all
all.
Gospels, they were all text. Yeah.
Oh, I guess they've all been published, etc. Right?
Now they are, yes.
How has the church reacted to that? Have they ignored it? Just disallowed
Well, they
it?
just consider it a heresy. You know, it's interesting. It's not that you had an Orthodox religion and then you had heresies developed afterwards. You had a whole bunch of religions, all of which came first. So the heresies came before the Orthodoxy. And in other words, there were various versions of Christianity. One of them wins out and then declares all the others to be heresies.
So this story about Jesus marrying Mary Magdalene.
Yeah. That comes out of the Gnostic. Yeah, there's a Gospel of Mary Magdalene, which is quite interesting because it says that Jesus loved her more than any of her other, any of his other apostles, and he told her secrets, and these secrets are the Gnostic secrets. So this is a Gnostic gospel which makes Mary Magdalene a vehicle. Jesus tells her things that he doesn't tell to the other apostles.
Eric?
Tell us something about things like how Bible scholars make the determination, okay, we have these 13 letters, well, 6 of them were written by one guy and the other 7 were written by one or more other people.
Yeah.
How we know that, okay, in this gospel, these parts were written by the original authors and these are later interpolations, and how we know that this manuscript is older than that manuscript.
Good question, yeah. Mainly, one of the ways they do it is things like word usage. You know, the vocabulary of a particular epistle is so different from the vocabulary of all the other epistles that it was not written by the same person. You're making the assumption when a person starts to write, he uses the same, he doesn't suddenly change his language in the middle of his career. Also, as they look at sentence length, in some of these epistles, there are these very, very long sentences which are not found in the ones that are considered to be authentically. So it's really a literary analysis of the writing style of the text and also of the content. So, for example, in the earlier works, Paul talks about women. He wanted women to be part of the church. He wanted women to be deacons. He wanted women to run congregations. And then all of a sudden, you read this epistle, the letter to Timothy, where he says women should not speak in churches. Women should be silent in churches. You know, so that obviously wasn't written by him. It was written at a later time. So that's one of the ways they know. Yeah.
An interesting point noted that the Romans called the Christians atheists.
Yes.
Because they did not believe in
one
the
of the
Roman gods
Yeah.
and would not sacrifice.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. The Jews also were considered to be atheists because they only believed. No. Listen to me. Oh, tradition, yeah, but they were an old religion.
Right.
So the Romans looked at them and says, well, they only believe in one God, which is really strange, but they're a very, very old religion, and so they don't have to worship they don't have to make offerings to our gods, and they don't want to work on Saturdays. They don't have to work on Saturdays. It's a very old religion. We'll leave them alone. But when the Christians came along, they said this is a new religion. The Christians then claimed that they were a descendant of Judaism, and they didn't get away with that. So for several hundred years, the Romans persecuted the Christians but left the Jews alone. As soon as Rome became Christian, bang. Then it was the Jews who were persecuted for the next 1,600 years.
Canada.
Just a couple comments. Harry made a comment. How do you know there are different authors or authoresses, whatever they are?
Yeah.
History Channel or Discovery Channel is a wonderful program in that where they actually show you how they've made those conclusions. There were different writers along the way. One of the most perfect examples of that is Josephus and he made his only reference to Jesus, how that has been changed 3 times.
Yeah.
So that's all the reference, by the way, Josephus was born, he wrote it 60 years after the time. There wasn't the time, so they discredit any comments Josephus had. The thing I want to make a comment about is your comments about whether Jesus existed or not. I want to go into whether he did or not. Frank Zindler, which I've heard many of his presentations, plus a guy named Fitzgerald, plus this guy just wrote a book. Much of their foundation of why they claim he didn't exist is based upon topography. It's based upon location of location, did that exist or not? And what's been happening is the Christian groups have spent millions of dollars trying to prove that, say, Nazareth existed.
Oh, yeah.
Nazareth didn't exist at
No,
any
no,
place.
no, 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 that's not true.
Okay, that's what he claims. That's what he claims.
Yeah.
He claims even Bethlehem may not be the Bethlehem we're talking about. It was the Bethlehem of the Nazareth, etc.
Yeah.
Okay. Bottom line is, I will try to bring in either Zindler or Fitzgerald or the other guy so you can hear their story. But they have a pretty convincing story.
Well, convincing to you.
Okay.
I see it. No, I see it as a
But I
very
think it might be
shiny
interesting.
scholar.
We
Anyway.
have one more question. You had a question before. Do you still have?
Sure. Is
Yeah.
there any consensus among Bible scholars on why Matthew, Mark, or the Gospels?
No. Matthew was the most popular of the Gospels at the time. That most people read. So the 4 Gospels were selected because they were popular, and that they were the Gospels that were read in the main communities, the main Christian communities. There was no central Christian area. I mean, Rome did not become the center of Christianity until, I think, 300 or 400 AD. So there was no pope. I mean, you know, the Catholics will tell you that Peter was the first pope. That's nonsense. There were bishops in each of these cities that were independent. And Peter, if he existed, and if this is true, was the bishop of Rome. And he was succeeded by other people who were the bishops of Rome. At some point, Rome became the dominant center of Christianity, and then the bishop of Rome became the leader of the church. So they retroject this back and say, you know, there were all these popes, but they weren't.
Books by Bart Ehrman.
Oh, my hero.
Included the book Misquoting Jesus, which
Yeah.
goes into these questions of documentation and how these things are determined. He also has books on the Gospels.
Yeah.
He's got books on the Gnostics. And it's all the latest and the best scholarship available. They're all popularly written and available in your local bookstore.
Bart Ehrman is, as I said, he's my hero. Wonderful writer. He's very easy to read. And the interesting thing is he started out as a fundamentalist, and through his scholarship became an agnostic. And he's not afraid to say this. And he is a wonderful scholar. So I recommend. He cranks out books like crazy. And they're good books. And he turns out one right after another. There's one he wrote called God's Problem, which is about the problem of suffering. Wonderful book. And he just cranks them out. And he also is on television. And he also does those audio tapes that you can play in your car. He has a whole thing on Christianity. I don't know where the guy, he has 27 hours in his day, I think. It's really amazing.
This lady here.
Yeah.
There's another guy who is a Christian. He's an Episcopal Bishop, John Spong.
Spong, yeah.
But his stuff is really great because he presents the Bible. He just sees, sins of Scripture is the one that I've read.
Yeah.
If you can forgive him for maintaining his faith, in sins of Scripture, he never does say why he maintains it. He does not say that. It's just.
Well, I know. The answer is really, yeah.
Within the church.
Yeah.
He's trying to reach to the church.
Yeah.
To be more loving. He just simply goes through the Bible and says anything that's not loving is not about his God.
Right.
And he just says it's ridiculous and it's extremely offensive.
Well, I tell you, religion is a, I'm sorry.
A lot of good history, a lot of
Yep. He's good. Religion is partly about belief in the community. And so I met one guy who gave a talk, and he said, well, he didn't believe in he's a Christian. He says, I don't believe in the virgin birth, and I don't believe in the resurrection, and I don't believe in this, and I says, I went, you don't believe in the resurrection? He says, no. I said, what makes you a Christian? He said, I belong to a Christian community. And so, the idea of being a member of the community, and a lot of Jews do this. They go to synagogue, and you'll find more atheists in a synagogue on a Saturday than you'll find in this room sometimes.
Somebody who has to ask a question.
Yeah.
I've heard that something like 40 or 50% of nuns don't believe in the virgin birth.
Well, they may have a reason to. I don't know. Yes.
Yeah, well, I was going to point out that so much of what people think is traditional Christianity was really invented by Constantine when he converted the Roman Empire to Christianity. For example, people think that the cross is a sign of Christianity. The cross was a Roman symbol. It was a little different. It had a spear typically at the top. And it was a Roman symbol, and most Christians just were disgusted at the very thought of the cross because that was the place where their Lord Jesus died.
That's right.
And their symbol of Christianity for about 300 years after the crucifixion was a fish. Because the Greek word ichthys, which is the word for fish, meant in Christ our Lord find resurrection, or etc. And also Jesus said to Peter, I will make you a fisher of men if you come with me.
Yeah.
And a good Christian, prior to the official conversion of the Roman Empire to Christianity, was supposed to constantly be a proselytizer all his life.
Sure.
And with the official conversion to Christianity, the cross became the adopted symbol, but primarily so that the Roman Christians would see the new religion as something acceptable. It's the same as before, except we just took the point off.
Right. And put this dead body on it. Right?
Eusebius was you find they knew nothing about it. Just no